All right, it's 3 o'clock our time, and welcome to our 30-minute extended disc webinar on building interactive activities into your virtual disc training. Hi, my name is Christina, and I'm the training director here at Extended Disc. Joining me today is my awesome senior trainer, Amy Lipinski.
Hello, everybody. Just figured out on webcam I had a hair sticking out.
Oh no, now you got me self-conscious.
Right.
And if you missed the kind of opening slide, as with most of our webinars, we'll be recording it. We encourage your questions. We love questions as trainers, but unfortunately, because of time, we won't always have time to answer them. So go ahead and put them in the Q&A section, and we will do our best to follow up during the session, or we promise we'll follow up after the session. So today, Amy and I are going to be sharing our resources and experiences on how we build interactive activities into our DISC virtual sessions. As we are all very aware of, we're living in a new normal where we are relying more and more on virtual trainings. That's something that's new for some of us. It's new for some of our learners. However, luckily for you guys, we've been doing this for many, many years. You know, with virtual trainings, there's obvious advantages and disadvantages. But one of the things we always want to ask ourselves is, how do we prevent learners from what we consider to be virtual overload? Or kind of the new lingo I'm hearing lately is, how do we keep people from being zoomed out? And one way we've found is to make sure that our sessions have a lot of variety, a lot of activities, and taking into account our learners' styles. And when used effectively, they can really energize your learners and, most importantly, apply and practice the learning goals of your session. So let's go ahead and get started. Amy, let's talk about setting the pace, setting the stage. I can talk.
That's all right, Christina. So when we think about setting the stage and we think about virtual learning and that interactivity, like Christina said, we've been doing this for a while. We have over 15 years of experience designing and facilitating in that virtual environment. And one of the biggest tips that I always give facilitators is, when you're thinking about designing or facilitating that session, think about it and approach it like you would your in-person, on-site classes, right? Think about ways that you can add that interaction into it. So think about activities, right? One of the first things I always think about when I'm facilitating, whether it's virtually or on site, is, what's the expectation? What's my outcome of this session? What do people want to get out of it? What are they expecting to be doing differently at the end of it? And then selecting those activities based on that outcome, right? Making sure that they're relevant, that they tie in with it, not just selecting activities because, hey, look at what Zoom can do, but that it's going to be relevant to the session you will be facilitating. You also want to think about the group size, right? That's going to also impact the activities that you can do. You can't really do breakout rooms if you have 3 people. So really thinking about the size of your group. And if it's your first time working on a virtual platform, it also might be helpful just to have an extra person kind of working your technology for you, so that you are able to focus just on facilitating. They can open and close polls. They can answer the question and answer or the chats, right? It makes your job easier to focus on just the facilitating, the content, right? And as you get more adept at it, you're able to take on more. But don't worry, it's great to have that co-host with you, especially if your mic decides not to work or you get internet disconnect, right? That can help out as well. And be sure that you apply your own DISC knowledge to that group, and think ways that you can do that when you're looking at the size of your group, and what's going to also be practical. Are you going to be able to achieve those outcomes with a group of 50, or does it need to be capped at a group of 12?
And with practice, you know, just to kind of build on what Amy is talking about, I can't stress enough, the preparation is key. Number one, once you've determined what activities that you want to use in your sessions, you need to time it. You need to determine, you know, do all these wonderful activities that I have planned, will they fit in the session? Always build in extra time. We always think that I can do this in 10 minutes. Just remember, especially in virtual sessions, your learners tend to be newer to it, and it typically requires more time. You're going to have to explain things more. You don't have kind of those nonverbal cues or the backups or the handouts that kind of make the time more efficient. So build in extra time. You heard Amy bring it up. Familiarize yourself with the technology, or in an ideal world, find someone who is familiar with the technology. But I highly recommend you learn how to do polls, you know how to change between apps, use the chat. I like to pre-warn learners myself, and again, just a tip, that technology and me have a love-hate relationship. And I can't tell you how many times that I've had to resort to plan B. The internet goes out, which again, just happened recently. Or your learners can't access the technology you want them to access. So also have a plan B. Prepare your learners. You want to make sure that they themselves are familiar with any of the apps that you want them to be using in the session. You know, ask them to log on ahead of time to make sure that they can. Check their audio before the session even starts. Do they need any materials in your session? How do you deliver materials to them virtually? You know, emails is the most obvious one. Sometimes our documents, like we like to send out participants' PowerPoint or links to videos. Sometimes we put these in Dropbox or Google Docs or whatever you want to use. Sometimes getting them the documents ahead of time, giving them options and time to actually download the documents and have them prepared. Do they need pencil and paper? All these things to do activities. So prepare your learners as much as you are preparing yourself. Next, we are going to go into how do we get off to a great start, going live.
So in part of that preparation, it's getting all of that technology activated before the session. And I was telling Christina before this call, this happened to me recently where I was running late to a session and I thought, no big deal, right? I'll just hop on, upload my PowerPoint, be ready to go. Well, guess what? There was a new download. And I'm sitting here waiting for this to download because I can't access my online platform then to get into the session. And so be prepared, right? Set aside that time for it. Get all of your web pages open. If you're going to show a YouTube clip, have your YouTube page open and queued up to that section that you're going to be showing, because it just gives a more professional look than them having to wait for you to find it. And what if you don't find it, right? That plan B. So having that prepared, having all of your windows open for everything that you need for your session, and also closing out anything that you might not need or want them to see, right? Having that control. And then setting reminders for our learners, having them check, check their sound, check their webcams, do they need those handouts? Can you download them straight from your virtual platform? Is it in an LMS system, right? What do they need to have so that they're ready to learn and get involved within the training. Because once you're going live, you want to be able to get right into the materials. You don't want to be taking the time during to kind of get all of those materials or that technology set up. You want to have them ready to go so that you can just get right into it.
Set the tone with warm-up activities. A lot of times, by having that activity up front, you're engaging the learners, you're energizing them, and they also know that the session itself is going to be an interactive one. Amy and I talk about a lot of things that we do in the classroom face-to-face setting, we can bring into our virtual sessions. So a lot of us do icebreakers. We do self-introductions, we do partnering, and you can still do that in your virtual sessions. So for example, you might want to do a poll, where people answer a very simple open-ended question. You can also utilize your chat room, especially for your more reserved learners. You might want to ask a questions like, how do you prefer to listen? How do you prefer to talk? Or that icebreaker activity, you can do it as a breakout room. And that's a great technology to utilize, especially if you have a larger group. You can, pre-schedule or pre-select and partner up individual pairs of learners and ask them to learn about each other in their breakout room, find something unique about each other, and then come back into the large group session and introduce their partner. It's a comfortable way of having our learners, especially our more reserved learners, feel comfortable, but also interact. Was there anything that you wanted to mention about it, Amy?
So yeah, I mean, everything you said was great. I think what also, as we set this environment for the learning, it's building that environment of trust for them, right? And it's also not only trust as a group, but trusting and becoming comfortable with the technology. So it can be, these warm-up activities can just be a great way for them to practice some of that technology, like Christina talked about, the chats, the breakout rooms, even the ideal office space that we use oftentimes as an icebreaker activity, right? They can draw it right on to their whiteboard and practice using their annotation tools. It just gives them a way to get involved, and they're a little bit more hands-on as well, and being comfortable with that technology, because we really want to, when we go live, make them feel comfortable in the technology and the classroom.
Right, so that it doesn't become a distraction from the learning process. The ideal office space exercise that Amy mentioned, that's an exercise that we have available to you. You can find that on our extended disc VIP client resource site. Very simple exercise. And also, lastly, I just want to mention mutual agreements. Again, what we're trying to do is we're trying to kind of establish trust and build expectations of what the session's about. And it's like an upfront contract, especially now that we're in our virtual learning spaces. We have distractions, people are, their dogs are barking or their kids are not at school, so there, things about setting the pace. What do we expect? What do we want to take away from this session? So if we save these things up front, we always have something that we can refer back to. So a mutual agreement is something else that's very powerful as an activity to do when you're starting your session.
And
so
oftentimes,
let's talk about, I was
going to say, oftentimes I'll tell people too, like, part of that is I'm going to call on you, and don't freak out. Like, I'm not calling on anybody to put them on the spot or make them feel uncomfortable, right? I always joke, you can phone a friend, because I want them to know, like, sometimes just for the essence of speed. I mean, we've all been on Zoom calls or virtual calls and meetings now. Like, what happens when you throw out that open-ended question? Everybody talks at the same time, right? And so sometimes just saying you're going to be calling on people, they can always pass the baton to someone else to answer. But sometimes that just gives us a little more control in that classroom, because it gets really frustrating really fast for everybody when we're all talking over one another. Which kind of leads us into our live session tips then. And the first one is really being mindful of the learner's styles, right? One of the things that we do at Extended Disc before we facilitate any session is we run a name map. We want to, I know I especially want to see where everybody in my session sits on the Extended Disc diamond. And that's going to give me a lot of insights on how to prepare for my session. It's going to remind me how I can apply my own disc knowledge, how I can modify, how I can adjust. It's going to give me ideas of, is my audience going to be like, all right, speed it up, make this fast, make it quick, right? Are they going to say, slow it down some? I need to absorb this. Are they going to ask questions? Are they going to be quiet? Are they going to be talkative? What can I expect, and how can I modify my facilitation, my slides, my style to meet their needs? And having those explicit instructions, right? Like Christina had mentioned, giving extra time to your activities, because just like activities, they're going to need detailed instructions. It's not as comfortable as in the classroom, where they can just kind of maybe raise their hand and ask a question, or ask another table group, hey, what are we supposed to be doing, right? And so they might not have those visuals. They might not have the technology, their expertise in the technology to really kind of know what they need to do. And so really checking in more, pausing, getting that confirmation in chat. I can't tell you how many times I have popped into breakout rooms and the participants are like, yeah, I don't remember. What am I supposed to be doing? And it's like, oh, you should have asked that in the main group. And then I go into all the other breakout rooms and it's like they all have that same question. So, ask it in that main group if you're unsure before you go off, because you want to make sure you give them those detailed instructions on exactly what you need from them and what they should be doing.
Track participation. So with tracking participation, it's not to force people to interact during the session. It's more of a way as a coach for me to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to interact. And when we're in a classroom face-to-face setting, it's much easier to do that. You heard us say again, make use of your chat room. It's a great way if you have a smaller group, just say, everybody got that, type Y for yes, N for no. Something as simple as that. You will see everyone tends to respond on the chat. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, looks like everyone's got it. There's no no's. Let's move on. Mm-hmm. If your group is larger, or you just kind of want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to interact if they choose to. For someone like myself who I don't have the best memory, I don't have the best short-term memory on top of that. So I like to actually just write out the list of my learners in the group, as long as they're not too big. And I tend to try to just make a notation, maybe put just a little check mark if that learner has already had the opportunity to interact. So that's a great way to do it. If they've had a chance to speak, if not, like Amy says, pass, that's okay. I still put a check mark. The opportunity was there for them. And that way it gives me kind of a way to go back and can kind of go through the group as many times as I need to. Offer incentives. As crazy as it might sound, people respond like crazy. It doesn't matter what the incentive is, it's the incentive itself sometimes. It could be as simple as, you can send them, some extra handout. Or what we like to do here is we like to offer, because we can, sometimes we offer a free disc assessment. So for them to share maybe with a family member or with a friend. Maybe for you coaches, you know, give them an extra 10 minutes later on of face-to-face one-on-one coaching time. So these incentives are very energizing, especially when you're doing these, you know, these activities like we have this one we use, and we don't sponsor it, we don't promote, you know, it's just something that we use. And there's many great apps out there, but we use Kahoot, Kahoot. .com, and you guys can find out yourself, but there are other apps as well. But it's just not only a trivia app, but it also ranks them based on correct answer, but also speed of response. So you can see just the energy of the group come up, especially when they know they're going to win something, and it shows them the rankings. And sometimes I'll actually interject that Kahoot game. Like if we kind of feel like, oh, the energy's kind of going down, let's take a quick break, come back, boom. You know, we were talking about this, but we're going to do Kahoot right now. So, you know, just build in that variety. If you sense the energy of the room kind of going down, throw in something that brings it back up.
And I think what's a lot of fun about that activity, Christina, or just the incentives in general, is some of those more reserved styles, all of a sudden it's like, I didn't know you were so competitive, right? Like you see that competitiveness come out regardless of what a person's style is. People like to win things, right? The next thing is thinking about breakout rooms and whiteboards. We've been talking a little bit, kind of throwing that in, but when you're preparing your session, think about how you can leverage these. Will these be helpful? Sometimes those more reserved individuals prefer being on one-on-one or a smaller group to have conversations, right? It can be ways that you can still do activities, get them into small conversations, and then bringing it back. What did you learn? Discussing things. And using whiteboards, right? Oftentimes a whiteboard is just like a flip chart piece of paper. It allows you to capture the conversation onto the board. And so not being afraid of using that technology, but learning how to use it so that it enhances. It should never take away or be more difficult or challenging, or not be conducive to the activity or the learning, but ways that you can engage them, get them involved. You can sometimes even assign, just like you would in a classroom, right? Okay, Becky, can you come up here and capture everything onto the flip chart paper? You can ask Becky to capture everything onto the whiteboard. People enjoy that. And then again, as the facilitator, you get to focus on debriefing the content and not worrying about debriefing and capturing it on the whiteboard.
And Amy, for a lot of us, you know, we're in this kind of speed learning curve as well. You know, we're learning about chat rooms and Q&A and breakout rooms and online learning apps. But what's great is most of those apps, the online meeting apps out there, like Zoom, like GoToWebinar, like Microsoft, a lot of them have these very quick, brief video tutorials. And it doesn't take long to learn them. And once you do, again, practice them. But the tutorials are out there. It takes a little bit of time, but in the end, it actually changes up how you can deliver this virtually.
Absolutely. And never be afraid to throw it out to your audience either. Hey, this is the first time. So, you know, fingers crossed, everybody. Let's see if this works and try it out. But practice ahead of time, right? Get your coworkers all together onto a team. Get family members on. Hey, I need everybody to sign in and let me practice putting you into a breakout room. Let's see if it works. And just like we do with the warm-up activity, end your session with a wrap-up activity. Again, getting them involved, checking in, you know, use a poll question. What was your biggest takeaway? Maybe going around, just kind of round robin of everybody, you know, if they're on webcam, just what did you learn? What's your biggest takeaway? How are you going to apply this moving forward? But making sure that you give them that voice. And again, having all kinds of different plan A's and B's, because sometimes by the end of the session, you're like, gosh, I've got a lot of time. Do a round robin of it, right? Or, oops, I have no time. Everybody type into chat real quick how you're going to apply this, right? One word of what you took away from the session. So that have different ways that you can wrap it up that allow for extra time or less time, but making sure that you make time to wrap it up in some way and get them involved and get their voices heard. And how we keep the learning going.
So with post-session reinforcement activities, there's no better way to reinforce our learning, of course, is when we are actually practicing it, putting it into our real world setting. And what's great is we here at Extended Disc, our goal, as I always say as trainers, is number one, to make your lives easier. So we have some resources for you. One of them is what we call our reinforcement reports. And you can see a screenshot of this. The Extended Disc reinforcement reports are essentially workbooks. And what's great about it is for your learners, they don't have to take another DISC questionnaire. Once they've probably taken your session, they've gotten their individual self-development report, then you can go back and just simply reorder these different types of reinforcement reports. So this one here specifically focuses on handling pressure situations, but we have ones on using your strengths, what you do under pressure. So there's many other focused workbooks. And what's great about them is they can be used as standalone follow-up reinforcement kind of training for them. And there's also, if you want to kind of do that deeper dive with your learners, we have this brand new My Self-Study workbook. And it really just, if your learners are really invested in their self-development, it takes them through the process at their own pace. We have other activities and exercises that are available on our Extended Disc VIP client resource site, including the My Communication Strategy workbook. If any of you have attended our webinars, you will probably have heard us talk about the 4 steps to effective interactions, effective communication. And what's great about the My Communication Strategy workbook, which you can download or we can send it to you later, is it takes you through the process of identifying DISC, identifying the DISC style of others, knowing your own DISC style, and building in an action plan. What am I going to do in terms of adjusting my style so that I can improve this interaction? Ask your participants, use technology, keep track of your daily DISC learnings, your successes, your awareness, it's an alert in your phone. What did I do today that was successful adjustments? You can create a journal, you can write down your successes. It kind of builds in that accountability. This is what I did today. And as a coach, you can ask them to kind of refer back to the journal to help you better coach them.
And again, technology, right? It's a great world that we live in and how we can connect. Set a reminder in your phone. Apply DISC, right? Check in at the end of the day with a reminder in your phone. How did you apply DISC? Use discussion boards, set up lunch and learns, make connections within your classes. Oftentimes what I find is those partnerships, right? You meet somebody in a session and you're like, gosh, Christina, your style's opposite from mine. I was just working with a client who is a similar style and I'm really struggling, right? It's really difficult. Can you help me? Because I have that rapport, I have that trust, there's a connection. It's easier for me to talk to someone I know about that different style and give me some tips on how to apply it, right? Have them kind of just wait, an area where you can post things. Maybe you have some technology that you can go out and post things, or even, you know, old school corkboard in your lunchroom, and people can write little notes up there that people can look at, and questions and answers. And feel free to reach out to us. We have a lot of resources that are available. Christina had mentioned some of them. You can look and find many of them on our client resource site for those of you who are active users of the extended DISC assessment. But one thing you will never find is a lack of resources. So if there's ever something you need, please feel free to reach out to us, and we can help you with that. And on our special note, it's just reminding ourselves about where we are right now and where our learners might be right now. And one thing we know for sure is that everybody is feeling some impact of this pandemic, right? So being aware of that, recognizing that your learners might not have the same capacity to learn that they may have in a different environment. So paying attention to that, right? They might have additional stressors or pressures that they're experiencing that are just going to be more challenging for them. So being aware of that. Sometimes it's the elephant in the room when you start off, right? Talk about it, bring it up. How's everybody doing? If you're in different geographies, everybody's impacted differently as well. So being able to have those conversations and check in to make sure everybody's safe and healthy.
And just to add on to the additional resources that Amy was mentioning, we actually have a handout called Building Interactive Activities into Your Virtual DISC Training. So it just takes what you guys have listened in on today and goes into more detail, has kind of, it's in written form. So reach out to us at info@extendeddisc.org if you're interested in getting that handout. We also have it available, as always, on our Extended DISC trainer resource site. You can download it from there. Our next session is debriefing the extended DISC assessment virtually. So how do we do a one-on-one coaching session using the extended DISC assessment? We'll talk about that next Wednesday, June 3rd at 3 to 3:15 Central Standard Time. Please sign up. Even if you can't make it, we'll record it and we'll let you know when it's available. You can go to our extendeddisc.org website. Go right up to the events tab, click on it, and you can see how to register for that webinar as well as other upcoming webinars. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Amy, and stay healthy and safe.
Thanks, Christina. Bye, everyone.